Yasher Koach to Aaron Zelinsky and Monica Mix and little Sarah for carrying the Torah, and also to Andy Feinberg. And Andy is observing this week the yahrzeit of both his daughter Jennifer, his son Joshua, and his brother Mark. So today is a first for Max. It's also a first for his parents. Bar mitzvah marks the first time an adolescent is called to the Torah, the beginning of his counting in a minyan, typically the first time he stands before his community to teach something about our tradition. As we transition from Max's powerful first adult Jewish moments to the Musaf service, I want to spend a few moments ruminating on the concept of firsts. Firsts, they stick with us. That's why they're often the security question for the password that you've forgotten. Think about your firsts. First pet, first house, first kiss, first car. We remember so many first-time experiences with affection and a warm nostalgia. But there are also firsts that trouble us, sometimes even haunt us. First car accident. First time you were mistreated by a boss. First time you realized you couldn't help your kid through a difficult moment. First time you became aware that people might not be as fundamentally good as you thought or hoped that they were. As we contemplate the Sukkot holiday, I want to consider two firsts with you, two firsts for the Jewish people. Each encounter took place in the formative moments of our nation, on the heels of the Exodus, in the dawning moments of our liberation. Moment one was the first time we encountered an enemy. Let me set the scene. We were fresh out of slavery, feeling good, the wind at our backs, a pretty powerful God in our corner. And then something tragic happened. We were attacked from the rear by a powerful and unscrupulous enemy. His name was Amalek. The Israelites ultimately won the day, but the results of the attack itself and the manner in which it took place left their mark on the Jewish people. Here's how it went down according to Exodus 17. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Pick some men for us and go out to do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses and Aaron and Hur went up the mount to the top of the hill. Then, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur on each side supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until the sun set, and Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. This first attack, at this particular moment in our history, is seared into Jewish memory. Amalek becomes the archetype of evil, the one Deuteronomy later tells us attacks in a cowardly fashion and without any compelling reason. Zachor et asher asa lachem Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down the stragglers in your rear. Amalek is Pharaoh. Amalek is Haman and Torquemada and Khmelnytsky and Hitler, because he is the first to rob us of our innocence, the first to prove our vulnerability. He is seared in our memory, the best and the worst firsts tend to be. He is the nagging sensation of dread we try but cannot shake. You shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Lo tishkach, do not forget. Rashi, in the 11th century, explains the trauma of the Amalekite attack is compounded by what happens before. We were kvetching, complaining, and wondering where in this wilderness could we get water. God and Moses solved the problem, but there's a cost. Rashi brings the following parable. It may be compared to a man who carried his son upon his shoulder and went out on a journey. The son saw an article, something on the ground, and said, "Father, pick up that thing and give it to me." He gave it to him. And so a second time, and so also a third time, they met a certain man to whom the son said, "Have you seen my father anywhere?" Whereupon the father, still carrying his son on his shoulders, looks down and says, "Don't you know where I am?" He therefore cast him off of his shoulders, and a hound came and bit him. So we'll leave aside the parenting choice for a moment. Amalek causes our fledgling people to question not just the possibility of just warfare, but the very notion that we are a safe and secure people. He violates not just our sovereignty, but also our innocence. Elsewhere, Rashi explains that Amalek is like a fool who comes and jumps into a vat of boiling hot water. Yes, he gets burned, but he also lowers the temperature of the bath just enough so that the next guy can get in unharmed. That's Amalek in Israel. We were on fire. We were soaring high, burning bright, having just crossed the sea, and along comes a troublemaker who confronts us for no reason and shows the world, "Hey, look, the Israelites are vulnerable. Come and see." It strikes me, this is not so different from the experience of victims of sexual assault. What I saw this week, as I watched Christine Blasey Ford's testimony, was a woman decades later reliving the trauma of her first attacker. I saw a mature and accomplished professional reduced to a schoolgirl on the verge of tears, haunted by memories of insecurity and trauma, telling her story before the world. I heard how she was attacked, pushed into a room from the rear, laughed at, and made to feel less than she was. And then I saw an angry, seemingly entitled, prep-schooled, white Christian man, inheritor of opportunity, used to getting what he wants, egged on by the President of the United States, have what amounted to a tantrum. And I saw, as the nation reacted to his anger, in a way that said, you know what? This guy seems sincere, even as he expressed so little regard, having not even listened to her testimony, for the accomplished, credible, professional woman who had the audacity to question his manifest destiny to a lifetime appointment on the highest court in the land. And then I saw 11 other white men and no women endorse the other privileged white man against the credible, professional, traumatized woman, as they seemed to worship the God of expediency over the God of truth. Zachor et asher asa lach Amalek, lo tishkach. So that's one first, the first experience of Jewish trauma, Amalek. And then there's the second first, which actually comes a little earlier. And that other historic Israelite moment, this one is not one of victimhood, but of freedom and shelter. We read, on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruits of the land, you shall celebrate Sukkot for 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred day of rest, and the 8th day shall also be a sacred day of rest. Why is our journey holiday called Sukkot? Moreover, why is the holiday of holidays, the holiday par excellence, Hechag, called Sukkot? Does it have anything to do with the first? Our ancestors' journey lasted 40 years, as we know. There were many, many stops along the way. Guess what the very first stop on the journey was called? And the Lord had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Thus they stripped the Egyptians, slave reparations, if you will. And then we're told, Vayisu v'nei Yisrael mi Ramses Sukkota. the Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot aside from children. So we're told that the first stop on the 40-year journey was in fact Sukkot. What does that mean for us? Well, it seems that somehow the psychic memory, if you were, of the Jewish people is captured by that first moment of encounter with a new place, that first moment of encounter as a free people. If Passover is the celebration of the moment, that first moment of our liberation, and Shavuot is the celebration of that first moment of receiving the Torah, then Sukkot, it seems, is an acknowledgement and celebration of that first moment after the moment of liberation, the first moment of going to a place that we can say we were there as a free people. And yet it is fraught, isn't it? Because, of course, we're not quite free. We're still in Goshen. We're still in the land of Egypt. We haven't yet come to the Sea of Reeds. We haven't crossed over into the Sinai wilderness. We haven't received the Torah. We haven't gone on to the Promised Land. And so that moment of our liberation, that first that we celebrate on this festival of Sukkot, having captured that name, also is a moment of anxiety, even as it's a moment of utter joy. There's an interesting tradition that we celebrate on this holiday. There are actually two important traditions. One of them is the lulav and etrog. Right? Raise your hand if you know what a lulav and etrog are. Right? You've seen these before. It's the 4 species that we bring together to celebrate the festival. And the interesting thing about the lulav and etrog is that is a personal, individual mitzvah. It's an obligation upon every Jew to actually own their own lulav. Well, don't worry, I'm not checking to make sure everybody bought theirs this year, but that's the basic idea. That's the aspiration, that you purchase a lulav and etrog and you celebrate, you wave those, the bounty. Everybody does it for him or herself. But the other mitzvah, the other sacred obligation on Sukkot, is not about a thing that we hold in our hands. It's a thing that we enter into together. It's the sukkah itself. It's the shelter. And the interesting thing about the sukkah is that it is holy, right? Holy as in sacred, but holy as in it has holes in it. If you have a sukkah this year, you learn that lesson the hard way, because every time we go in the sukkah, except for last night, drip, 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 the rain on our heads. And that's the point. The sukkah, that booth that we reminisce was the shelter, the temporary shelter that our ancestors went in the wilderness, I think becomes that shelter because of that first moment, that moment of encounter with a place whose name is Sukkot, and it desires somehow to capture in memory and practice what that moment meant to us as a people. We're called wandering Jews for a reason. We've wandered for a lot of our existence. But even now, after 70 years of Jewish sovereignty in the land and state of Israel, we have with us that sense of trauma, to be sure, of having been on the road, of having been attacked from behind. And at the same time, we have with us the collective memory of what it is to be adventurers, to go out into the world on a grand adventure, seeking new places, finding new locations. And both of those things are a part of the collective psyche of the Jewish people. And both of them have to do with first moments that we carry with us always. And so what I want to invite us to do as we move toward the conclusion of the Sukkot holiday and into Shmini Atzeret and into Simchat Torah, when we celebrate finishing the Torah and renewing it again with Genesis, is what are the ways that we ourselves can take hold of the journeys of our people. 3,300 years later, we carry with us the memories that invite us into the memories of ourselves and our families, that invite us into a grand horizon toward which we strive as a people as well. May we be blessed in our journeys and all the firsts that are to come. Amen.